Darius Monroe had less than 4 minutes. 4 minutes to reach the ER where a young girl lay in full respiratory arrest. Her name was Haley Lancaster, 10 years old. Daughter of Police Chief Bill Lancaster. Yes, that Bill Lancaster, the man who once said on live television, "There's no room for hesitation in law enforcement." Tonight, his daughter's heart was collapsing by the second, and the only man who could save her, the only one with the precise training to perform a high-risk pediatric thoracotomy on site, had just been pulled over on a stretch of highway. So dark even the moon refused to watch. And now you're here. For reasons you can't quite explain, you clicked on this, like some part of you knew, like your mind reached out to something buried under headlines beneath layers of everyday noise. This isn't a news story. No one aired this footage. There is no press conference. This is a moment stolen from the timeline, like a sealed file you've accidentally opened. You are the only witness. And something about that feels wrong, like you're trespassing on something sacred and broken. The cruiser's lights were still flashing when the officer approached the driver's side, window hand resting on his holster, not out of fear but habit. Darius sat there, still in his navy blue scrubs, his hospital badge hanging like a noose from his neck, and a small stain of dried blood on his cuff. The officer asked for license and registration. Darius provided both. Voice calm, controlled, trained. "I'm a trauma surgeon. I'm en route to Memorial. I was called in for a code blue. It's a child." He said it once, then again, slower. "It's the police chief's daughter." But the officer didn't move, didn't blink. His partner stepped up to the other side, flashlight reflecting off the dashboard. Two trained men, hearing the words, but not listening. And then something happened that no one can explain. The radio on the officer's shoulder crackled. Not the usual dispatch buzz, not even static. It was a woman's voice, soft, cracking, unfamiliar. "He doesn't have time. Let him go." It wasn't HQ. It wasn't a known channel. The officer flinched, like the words slid directly into his brain. His partner looked at him, confused. "What did she say?" The partner asked. But the first officer, the one with his hand still on the holster, stepped back, paled. He asked Darius one question. "What did you say your name was?" And before Darius could answer, the officer staggered back like something just broke in his mind. He dropped the flashlight. It hit the asphalt with a dull thud and rolled into the shadows. No, that's not possible," he said under his breath. You were declared dead 7 years ago." The dashcam flickered. The timestamp glitched for 1 second, just one. From 12:41 a.m. to 12:42, it skipped backward. A full minute erased. Gone. And that's when everything began to unravel. Not because Darius was dead, but because the name whispered over that radio, the one no one else heard, not even the other officer, wasn't Haley Lancaster's. It was Darius's mother. And she died 23 years ago in a house fire no one talks about anymore, not even him. But tonight, someone, something, remembered, and it doesn't want him to reach the hospital, not because it fears what he might find, but because it already knows what's waiting for him there. The moment that radio voice, soft, cracked, impossibly distant, whispered his mother's name, something inside Darius Monroe fractured. The air thickened, like the space around him had been sucked into some unseen vortex. The officer's pale, trembling words, "You were declared dead 7 years ago," echoed in his ears, but they felt less like a declaration and more like a question, or worse, a warning. Time bent, the timestamp on the dashcam flickering and skipping, swallowing a full minute of reality. Yet Darius sat frozen, the hum of the cruiser's engine a faint heartbeat beneath the chaos. Was this real? Or was it a hallucination bred from exhaustion, stress, and something darker still lurking beneath his fractured memories? You have to understand, what Darius is experiencing isn't just the physical tension of a surgeon caught in a nightmare traffic stop. It's the unraveling of the very fabric of his mind, a slow bleed into a shadowed place where trauma, grief, and the supernatural entwined so tightly they can't be pulled apart. There are no clear lines anymore, no certainty. The officer who pulled him over, the one now whispering about his death, seemed less a man and more a specter emerging from a memory that refuses to die. The faint radio voice, the one no one else heard, seemed to pulse with a hidden message, as if the air itself was trying to speak truths no one wanted to face. Behind his eyes, flickers of half-remembered scenes flashed, like fragments of a forgotten film. A woman crying in a burning house, a small child screaming, a face that wasn't quite his mother's, but close enough to ignite the embers of long-buried pain. But he couldn't trust these images. They felt too raw, too disjointed, as if someone had edited the reels of his mind without his consent. His hands shook, his breath came shallow and uneven. Was he losing his grip on reality, or was reality itself slipping through his fingers like smoke? Then, the voice returned, not over the radio, but inside his head, subtle and insistent. They don't want you to remember. The words felt like a chill running down his spine, both a command and a curse. Who were they? The police, the hospital? Some darker force tied to the mysterious fire that took his mother's life? The more he searched his mind for answers, the more he realized that whole blocks of his past were smudged, erased, or rewritten. The truth was buried deep under layers of denial, and something far more sinister. As Darius tried to steady himself, a new figure emerged from the shadows of the roadside. A woman, her coat pulled tight against the cold, eyes sharp but unreadable. She called herself Elise. "I'm here to help," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. But from the moment she appeared, nothing about her felt grounded in the world Darius knew. She asked questions he hadn't thought to ask himself. She seemed to know things about him, things he didn't remember telling anyone. And yet, there was a flicker of something off in her eyes, a hesitation, a secret she wasn't sharing. Elise was both a comfort and a threat, a friend and a puzzle wrapped in a riddle. Together, they stood beneath the flashing blue and red lights, the distant wail of sirens blending with the soft hum of the night. Elise pulled out a small recorder from her bag, pressing play. Static filled the car's interior, but through it emerged a voice, Darius's voice, reciting details about the fire that no living person should remember, details he didn't remember. Or did he? The recording contradicted everything he thought he knew about his own history, twisting the narrative into something unrecognizable. Was this proof of a conspiracy, or was it evidence of his own unraveling mind, manipulating memories like a cruel trickster? The tension twisted tighter as Elise leaned close, her breath warm against his ear. They're watching. Not just the police, not just the hospital. Something bigger, something older. You've been part of this story longer than you realize. They erased your death, your pain, because some truths are too dangerous. The real unsolved mystery isn't who pulled you over. It's what they don't want you to remember. Darius blinked. The world around him shimmered, and the ambulance speeding past didn't have a siren, just silence. His phone vibrated in his pocket, but when he looked, there were no messages. Only one unread voicemail. He played it. The voice on the other, and was distorted, layered beneath static and an undercurrent of something mechanical. Darius, trust no one. They'll come for you. Then, just like that, the streetlights went dark. The cruiser's flashing lights died. The night swallowed them whole, and somewhere, just beyond the edge of hearing, a child whispered a name no one alive should know. The morning light crept through the cracked blinds of the hotel room where Darius sat, clutching a faded photograph. He'd found tucked inside an old case file at the hospital archives, an archive no one had ever mentioned, a place where forgotten records gathered dust like secrets waiting to be exhumed. The photo showed a burnt-down house, charred and hollowed out, but the edges were blurry, like a memory fading. Scribbled on the back was a date, March 14th, 1998, his mother's death day. His thumb brushed over the ink, tracing the letters as if they might speak to him again. And then, tucked beneath the photo, was a newspaper clipping. A headline about a missing child found days after a fire, a child who'd vanished without explanation. The name caught his breath: Haley Lancaster. The puzzle suddenly snapped into something like focus. The girl in the emergency room, the one he'd been rushing to save when pulled over by those officers, wasn't just the police chief's daughter. She was the missing child from that fire, all those years ago. Somehow, impossibly, Haley had survived, hidden away by forces that wanted the truth buried deep beneath the ashes. Darius felt the weight of it, the creeping certainty that he was part of a story that stretched far beyond the hospital walls, beyond the desperate urgency of saving a child's life. He was staring at the hidden truth, the memory glitch nobody had told him about, the mystery uncovered. His phone buzzed again, a message from Elise. "Meet me at the old station, answers waiting." With nothing left to lose, Darius found himself driving toward a building shuttered long ago, the graffiti peeling from the walls like torn skin. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and dust, but in the dim light, Elise was waiting, holding a folder full of documents. She slid it across the cracked counter to him, a tangle of police reports, emergency call transcripts, and medical files. Every piece matched perfectly. Haley Lancaster's disappearance, the fire, the official declaration of her death, the sudden unexplained reappearance. It all fit. Too well. Too neat. "This was covered up," Elise said softly, eyes darting to the darkened corners as if shadows had ears. Someone didn't want Haley to be found. Someone powerful enough to rewrite history. For a moment, hope flickered in Darius's chest, a fragile ember. They were about to expose the truth behind what no one tells you. He felt the rush of clarity after years of blurred lines and fractured memories. But then came the crack, the detail no one noticed, buried deep in the medical files. The time of death listed for the child in the fire victim report wasn't Haley's, it was Darius's. His own birth certificate showed he was born 3 years after the fire. The pieces shattered again. The face in the photo, the missing child. He wasn't who he thought he was. Haley Lancaster had never disappeared. She had always been there. The child who vanished was someone else entirely. Someone linked to him, but erased from his history, hidden beneath layers of forgotten pain. And then the walls seemed to close in. A memory surged up from the depths, raw and indistinct, but heavy with dread. A hospital room. Fluorescent lights flickering overhead. A woman screaming in a voice that wasn't his mother's. A nurse's hurried steps. A stranger's cold hands. A shadow lurking just beyond the threshold. The same shadow that had whispered his mother's name on that night long ago. The same shadow watching now. Not in flesh, but in presence. An unseen force threading through every moment of his life, breathing down his neck, erasing and rewriting, haunting his every step. Elise's voice broke through the fog. "They've been watching you since the beginning. Not just the police, not just the hospital, something older. Something waiting for you to slip." Darius's breath caught. The fear wasn't just about who he was or what he remembered. It was something deeper, more personal. This wasn't just a conspiracy. It was a psychological labyrinth designed to trap him, to keep him guessing, to keep him unraveling piece by piece. He realized then that every truth he'd uncovered was a carefully constructed mirage. The real danger wasn't out there, the open. It was inside his fractured mind, a presence so subtle and pervasive it slipped past reason and logic. The very memories that grounded him were lies, edited and replayed on a loop by a force that thrived on confusion and silence. "You're not crazy," they lied to you. And now, forced to confront this, Darius saw the horror clearly. The story he'd been following from the start was never about Haley. It was about him, and the shadow that waited in the spaces between his memories was ready to claim him entirely. In the cold light of dawn, as Elise watched silently, Darius felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the growing knot of panic, disbelief, and a terrible recognition. The timeline he thought he knew was a lie. The narrative he'd trusted was a carefully planted illusion, and the flash of the radio voice calling his mother's name, it was a warning and an invitation, a call from something that had never stopped watching, never stopped waiting. As he looked again at the photograph, the newspaper clipping, the erased minutes on the dash cam, a single horrifying thought surged up, displacing everything else. If the past could be rewritten so thoroughly, if memories could be erased and voices whispered through broken radios, then maybe the entire story, the entire nightmare, had already happened before. And maybe, just maybe, it was about to start all over again. The truth wasn't behind him, it was inside him, and it was far more dangerous than he ever imagined. You're not just watching a story unfold, you're caught inside it. And every detail you thought you understood, you'll have to watch again to believe. Because the answer isn't hidden in what was said. It's hidden in what no one ever dared to remember. The truth, as Darius had begun to unravel it, was a jagged shard of a larger mirror, one that fractured not only his own existence, but the fragile reality of others. It was the kind of revelation that clawed at the edges of sanity, the kind that made you look over your shoulder, questioning whether the shadows in your periphery were figments of a deteriorating mind, or evidence of something profoundly, terrifyingly real. And then the messages began, subtle at first, slipping into the cracks between his waking hours like whispers in a crowded room no one else seemed to hear. They were cryptic, lines of text hidden in innocuous places, radio static that flickered into a phrase just before fading into white noise, symbols scrawled on bathroom walls, ancient-looking glyphs intertwined with numbers that didn't add up but felt urgent, like a code meant for a handful of eyes only. On the surface, they were fragments of nothing, dismissed by most as glitches or pranks. But for those who dared to look, for those who carried the same invisible thread as Darius, they were a lifeline, a secret communication between people who knew they were being watched, manipulated, and erased. Darius wasn't alone. Some nights his dreams tangled with voices not his own, the echoes of memories that felt simultaneously foreign and intimately familiar, shared visions that blurred the lines between his waking world and something deeper, something that might have existed in another time or dimension altogether. And the most unsettling part was how these images and sensations seeped into his reality, making him question whether the fractures in his mind were self-inflicted or the symptoms of a much larger force pulling at the strings behind the scenes. From a third perspective, an observer watched with cold detachment. The camera was never fixed on their face, only glimpses. A hand adjusting a worn leather notebook filled with painstaking notes, a reflection caught in a cracked mirror, the steady, unblinking gaze from behind a curtain of shadows. This figure recorded everything, piecing together the fragments of stories like a collector of secrets no one else was meant to see. They spoke not to Darius but to the audience, those who had stumbled into this labyrinthine nightmare without warning. Their voice was a whisper wrapped in certainty, a thread of sanity amid chaos. "You were right all along," they said in a tone both accusing and reassuring. "But what you think is the truth. It's only the surface of what's been buried for decades." They held up a battered VHS tape, labeled in fading ink. Found. Footage from 20 years ago. What the government never released. The tape was cracked, its edges frayed like the boundaries of reality itself. The footage showed a hospital, the same one Darius had worked in. But the rooms were darker, the faces more desperate, and the shadows seemed alive, lurking in places where no one should be. A nurse stared directly into the camera, eyes wide, with silent warning before the tape cut to static. It was a puzzle designed to drive the mind into a spiral of doubt. Who was really in control of the story? Who determined which memories to keep and which to erase? Every symbol, every hidden message seemed to point to an omnipresent force, a puppeteer cloaked in layers of bureaucracy and myth, twisting identity and perception until the very idea of self became a fragile, fractured thing. The idea that memory was a weapon, control was an illusion, and that the truth was simply another lie carefully constructed to keep everyone in line. And yet, the viewers, the silent witnesses, were drawn in deeper. Each cryptic message felt personal, as if the story had folded itself around them too, as if their own memories might be part of the same tangled web. The observer's voice grew heavier with urgency, the weight of unseen eyes pressing through, the screen like a cold breath on the back of the neck. This isn't just about Darius or Haley, they warned. It's about all of you, about what they never wanted you to remember, about the threads that connect us all through time and fear. They've been watching us, pulling the strings of identity and memory to keep us silent, to keep us compliant. But now that you're here, the rules have changed. The room seemed to close in around the viewer, the line between observer and participant dissolving into something ambiguous and terrifying. Who were they? What were they watching? And how? Much of their own story had already been rewritten without their knowledge. The final frame of the tape lingered on a figure standing in the shadows, too blurred to recognize but unmistakably human, yet utterly alien. The screen flickered one last time before going black, leaving nothing but the heavy silence of the unknown. And in that silence, the only certainty was this: the story was far from over. The watchers were still watching, the messages still flowing, and the truth, the real, raw, hidden truth, was waiting to consume anyone brave enough to seek. You thought you were just watching, but maybe you were right all along. Maybe they never wanted you to see this. And now that you have, there's no turning back. The moment came quietly, like the slow exhale of a breath held too long, as Darius sat alone in the dim light of his apartment, the walls closing in with the weight of all he'd uncovered, of all he still didn't understand. The tapes, the messages, the fractured memories, they had led him here to a precipice not of answers, but of something far deeper, far more personal. The mystery had shifted. It was no longer about the how, the who, or the when. It was about the why. Why had this fractured reality chosen him? Why had it chosen them all? The watchers, the forgotten, the ones who vanished without a trace. He could feel it now beneath the questions and the paranoia, the slow unraveling of self, a raw, aching truth about what it meant to be human. Fragile, fragmented, desperate for meaning in a world that refused to give it freely. It was the most terrifying mystery of all, that the thing he was fighting against wasn't just some outside force, but the darkness that lived inside every soul, the silent ache of loneliness, the need to be seen, to be remembered, to matter. That maybe the real nightmare was not the conspiracy or the erasures or the hidden watchers, but the unspoken truths buried deep within himself, fears he'd never dared to face. Darius's hands trembled as he held the phone, the message glowing on the screen. A single text from Haley, the police chief's daughter whose voice had once shattered the silence with a whispered name no one else had heard. She was gone now, vanished like a ghost, leaving behind a void where trust and hope had once lived. The message was a confession, a plea wrapped in sorrow. I never wanted this. They made me forget who I was. But I remember you. Remember me. You're not alone. And suddenly the choice was clear. He could chase the truth, the dangerous, soul-shattering truth that promised to rip apart everything he knew. Or he could turn away and live in the safe illusion of ignorance. But what was safety in a world where reality itself was a lie? What was survival if it meant surrendering to emptiness? The line between savior and victim blurred as memories flooded back. His mother's voice, distant but clear, speaking of secrets kept too long, of pain that never healed. He remembered the hospital room where it all began, the cold sterility masking a human story of loss and hope tangled so tightly they couldn't be unraveled without breaking. The very thing he sought to understand was not an enemy, but a reflection. A mirror held up to his own soul, fractured yet yearning for light. His breath caught as he whispered aloud to the shadows, "Maybe the truth isn't meant to save me. Maybe it's meant to wake me." And in that moment of fragile clarity, as the lines between dream and waking dissolved, Darius understood the weight of his own story, that some awakenings come with a cost so high it threatens to consume you whole, but without it, you remain trapped in a prison of unknowing. The mystery was no longer a puzzle to solve, but a journey to endure. To live through the fear and the doubt until the pieces, however shattered, made sense in the silence. Outside, the night held its breath, as if the world itself waited for his choice. And you, watching now, feel the tremor of that same awakening, caught between what is seen and what remains hidden, between who you are and who you have yet to become. Because some truths don't just want to be found, they demand to be faced. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.